All right, Sean. Well, I'm excited to have you here today. And a little fun fact for those listening in, we're recording this early on a Friday. Sean is in Puerto Rico. Hopefully, it's okay if I say that. I won't give you his exact location. He's got his Keep Climbing shirt on for those that are just listening to
Hey,
this. But welcome, Sean. It's a pleasure to have you.
I appreciate that. Yes, I am in Puerto Rico. It's beautiful down here. Very, very hot and different than where I usually live in Colorado.
I am sure, although lower, and you probably only run around the perimeter of the island like 5 times this morning, right?
Actually, what's funny is I was talking to my manager the other day, and I was like, dude, I'm down here in Puerto Rico running around the island. Like, not literally running around the island, but just running errands and stuff. And he started laughing. He's like, yeah, I wouldn't put it past you to run around the island.
Yeah. Well, for those listening in, you will get why I'm asking this of Sean in just a second. So I will lead in with my question, which is, according to my research, you are a hard man to slow down. You apparently are the only person in recorded medical history to have had, this is not an honor, but it's amazing you survived it, both stage 4 Hodgkin's and Askin sarcoma cancers. And I believe you told Bobby Valvano, who is the brother of the legendary and late Jimmy Valvano, or Jimmy V, after you won ESPN's Never Give Up award, that you had better odds of winning the lottery 4 or 5 times, not once, 4 or 5 times with the same numbers than to have survived both of these terminal cancers. Tell us more about this early journey that clearly shaped who you are today.
Absolutely. And it's funny, I recently did a TED Talk in Prague. And as opposed, because it was over in Prague, they're like, they didn't understand the odds of winning the lottery. So I boiled it down to a 0.000000001% chance of living. So that's pretty much what you have for winning the lottery, point and then 9 zeros, and then a one at the end. So I had a better chance of winning the lottery numerous times over. And it's because, like you said, advanced stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. When I was 13 years old, no symptoms, no signs of any disorder, maybe a few swollen lymph nodes, but no one saw it. I didn't have night sweats, none of that. And then I was actually got an injury playing basketball. And that knee injury, thankfully, saved my life. It also changed my life. So I was stuck in the hospital for a while, and I grew up in a small town in Ohio where the backyard was a bean field or a cornfield, depending on the season, which I guess, looking at pesticides, hindsight being 2020, they kind of put two and two together, and maybe that's where the Hodgkins came from. We'll never know. But because I was born and raised in such a small town, they tried treating me for pneumonia because they thought I had pneumonia. You're not going to cure cancer by sucking on a nebulizer, so I wasn't
Right.
getting any better. They stuck me in a larger hospital, and then eventually I got through that and was diagnosed after a year of being in remission with advanced stage 4 Askin sarcoma. And that's when the doctors actually told my parents, your firstborn son, he's given 14 days to live. So I had an expiration date of 14 days.
I mean, I can't even imagine your poor parents, and here you are. And just listeners, wait for it. It gets better. And like the fact that he survived that and, essentially won Powerball 3 times, which I think is at $1.7 billion right now, is
Right.
crazy, but it does get better. But before we do there, you have this fun fact about you, and that is that you've been voted one of the top 8 most inspirational people in history. So how does that feel? And do you know who the other 7 are?
I think it feels great. I think my parents and my family members were probably on that voting board. So maybe that's how I got that award.
They deserve it, man. After everything they've been through, they deserve to
Yeah,
be on
no
that voting
kidding.
board.
No kidding. No, I appreciate that. Other people were Bruce Lee, Winston Churchill, um, Muhammad Ali. And the interesting thing is, I think out of 7 of those people, I'm one of the few living individuals who's on that list. So I don't know if it's at one point Wikipedia said that I died, which obviously isn't true unless you're speaking to a ghost right now who has all his faculties, who can think and
You
work a
look pretty real
computer.
to me. Again, listeners can't tell, but I can see this guy who's moving around and, looking good and looking healthy. So I think you're alive.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, and it was an honor, and it was a number of years ago, and I'm assuming that we're probably going to get into why I was voted one of the top most inspirational people in
We
history as
we
well.
100% are, and that's some pretty good company to keep, by the way, especially Bruce Lee. That guy's kind of a badass. But uh, this is where we start to talk about why is it that Sean is so inspirational. You ask. Tell us what an explorer's grand slam is.
I believe it's a Denny's breakfast platter.
That is true. There's a more important version of it though that you completed, and I think everyone wants to hear what this sounds like.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have always thought it sounded like a Denny's breakfast platter, but it is climbing the highest mountain on every continent, including Mount Everest.
Which
So the
is kind of
seven
a big deal.
summits. Yeah, it's kind of a big deal, which we didn't mention this. I also climbed and I've done all this with only one functioning lung. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. Everest, the highest mountain on every continent, that's the seven summits. And then when you reach the South Pole and then the North Pole, that's called the Explorer's Grand Slam. And you can't just take a helicopter to the South Pole. You can't take a helicopter to the North Pole. And you definitely can't take a helicopter to the top of Everest because helicopters can't even fly that high.
Well, that's crazy. And then wait for it, it gets better. So if that wasn't enough for mere mortals with one lung, um, you completed the Hawaii Ironman, which I think is the triathlon, which I think is the OG and incredibly hard, and ran 7 consecutive marathons in 7 days on all 7 continents. I mean, like, I have to ask, like, what are you made of? And like, how did you get this desire to do these absolutely, superhuman things that I don't think anyone in their right mind could ever do, especially with one lung? That's crazy, Sean.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm made of the same flesh and bone and blood and organs as everyone else. I just think that I've learned how to utilize my setback as my superpower. And as opposed to going through the cancers and bouncing back into life, I bounce forward into life. And I think everyone's capable of it. You just have to have the right tips and tools and know how to use what you've been through to as your strength. And I think once you figure that out, then you can continue to do amazing things. We're all capable of amazing things. We just need the right tools, we need the right support group, and we need the right amazing things. Because not everyone's going to climb Everest. However, we all have an Everest to climb. You just have to figure out what your Everest is and go after it with the right tips and tools.
Well, that's a great transition. It's almost like you knew what was coming here. So you've written 2 books about your journey. The one I wanted to talk about today is called Being Unstoppable, Conquering Your Everest. So this is a story of survival, adventure, and cliffhanging suspense. This is from Amazon. That concludes with some practical steps readers can use to fulfill their own dreams and goals. So let's talk a little bit about that, and what are some of those? I think you and I talked a little bit about turning your trauma into your superpower, which clearly you've done. But let's talk about some of the other tips and tricks and tools that you provide in the book to help people, even if it's like, I want to walk again because I've been in a wheelchair forever or whatever. Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because in the book, I've never seen a book written this way before, to be honest with you. In the book, there are stories of going through my cancer and then leading up to the summit of Everest. And I I think it also talks about coming down Everest because once you get to the top, you're only halfway. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that. You have to get off the mountain safely as well. But embedded in the stories are the lessons that I learned going through what I went through. So no one can relate to the successes, but people can relate to the struggles. We all have struggles. And one of the biggest ones I had was I remember being, overweight, 60, 70 pounds, heavy, and on my hands and knees on the shower floor, just absolutely sobbing. My hair was falling out in chunks, clogging up the drain. The water was rising up in the drain, so I was pulling chunks of hair out so the water could go down. And I remember projecting myself into the future and, well, actually not myself, but just projecting into the future and seeing what my mom, my dad, and my brothers' lives were like without me in it. And I think because one of my personal core values is family, that was a main reason for me to push forward. for someone else. For another one of my personal core values is charity. So if you can figure out what your personal core values are and develop a reason to take another step and a deeper purpose behind the goal that you want to achieve, then you're going to have an unlimited, an untapped well, an untapped reserve of strength and motivation to move forward. It's not going to be fleeting inspiration. It's going to be full empowerment to help you accomplish what you want, and not what others want for you, but what you want for yourself.
Well, it's an amazing story, and I just it's still mind blowing. And then that thank you for sharing that vulnerable scene of you in the shower with chunks of hair falling out, because you want to talk about, like, I'm on Everest, one lung, I just summited the highest peak in the world, and then going to that, being overweight and being miserable, but realizing that family and charity and purpose were the things that were going to move you forward. I do want to give you a chance to sort of share, and then we'll get into the charity piece because that's why we're here. Where can people find the book? Where can they find out more about you? So where would you like them to go? And I'll make sure I put this in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. That's the easiest question so far. Just go to SeanSwarner.com, my first and last name.com.
Thank you for keeping that easy. Not the get SeanSwarner.com or, let's be SeanSwarner.com. So cool. And I've gone to the site and there's lots of great content there. Speaking of, you've also been the subject and the executive producer of a documentary called True North, the Sean Swarner story. What was it like doing that? That must have been pretty cool. Like seeing
You know,
your life kind of be codified in film.
it was interesting because a production company based near Philly called The Workshop followed me on the last part of the Explorers Grand Slam, going to the North Pole. So as I mentioned, it's 7 summits, South Pole and North Pole. The North Pole was the last one I had to accomplish. And they followed me up there from home all the way up to literally the top of the world. And it was beautifully done because you cannot recreate that on AI. You cannot recreate that in the studio. And we got some amazing footage, including footage of us being tracked by polar bears. So that kind of relates back to the concept and idea of how many people in life worry about things they have no control over. And it all stems back to two words, which is what if? What if this happens? What if that happens? Well, what if it doesn't? Now, granted, there's a little difference between, worrying about, I hope this doesn't happen in my life. I hope what if I didn't turn off the stove? Great. Well, I mean, that's pretty bad because you might burn down your house, but you probably just come home to a warmer kitchen. But there's a difference between that hypothetical and someone who might be eaten by a polar bear. But still, just that concept of what if. And while you're watching the film, do keep in mind with this and any other documentary that you see, there's what they call the talent who's doing their thing. Him or her is doing her thing or his thing. And then you have the people with the cameras following along, doing the same thing, but filming. Me personally, I think that's more impressive than what I did. Because they were going along filming and doing what we were doing. We moved up just to be behind the scenes. We divvied up the batteries, the extra weight, and everything else. And every time we would get to camp for the night, we would have to set up the tents and get water boiling and get snow melted to get the water boiling. And then after everything was set up, like, okay, Sean, we need to go film. We need to get some B-roll. It's like, we just spent 8 to 12 hours pulling a 200-pound sled behind us north, and now all of a sudden we have to go do extra filming. It's like, we just need sleep, man. I just want to go to bed.
Can we rewind to the fact, though, by the way, that you've survived 2 life-threatening diseases which should have killed you? You did all of this, summiting and went to the South Pole. Thank goodness the polar bears didn't get you, because that would have been quite anticlimactic and would have been too bad because of the fact that it would have prevented you from doing what we're going to talk about next, which is your charitable work. This show focuses on the good, the societal good that people are doing. And clearly you're living this with what you do. Your story itself is a motivation, right? Your books, the documentary, but you support multiple charities. There's Origins Accessories. There's I Believe in You. There's the You also collaborate with the artists in Moshi, Tanzania to sell their paintings to support the community. But the one I want to talk about, which you and I did in our pre-prep, which I love this model, I think it's super cool, is Cancer Climber Association. And I think if I get the premise right, you help cancer survivors raise funds to summit Kilimanjaro, which is the highest peak in Africa, I believe. And then the following year, they have to turn around and help someone else. Like, let's talk about this. And there's also a little sort of dessert at the end of the climb, which I loved that I didn't know about. And tell us about your charity.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The Cancer Climate Association was founded a number of years ago by my brother and I. And yeah, like most charities, we shifted direction every once in a while. And we finally honed it down where, exactly like you mentioned, we cover a survivor's trip, all costs covered, to go over to East Africa, Tanzania, to climb the highest mountain on the continent. And it's not even a climb, it's more of a hike up to over 19,000 feet. So it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. But then the survivor who goes that year, it's their responsibility to raise funds for next year's survivor, paying it forward. What I find just really amazing is putting those survivors in touch with one another. So that way they discuss their journeys, their cancer journey and the journey up and down the mountain. So it's really beautiful. And for the past 7 years, my wife's charity, as you mentioned, the Origins Accessories, every time I'm on the mountain, her charity supported 100 orphans every year with food.
Oh, that's amazing.
So
So we need to get her on the
she's
show at some point in time, clearly.
absolutely she's an amazing woman, and well, she's the reason I'm in Puerto Rico. She's Puerto Rican, born and raised down in San Juan. But the Cancer Climate Association has been doing this for years. I just got back from my 27th trip up the highest mountain in Africa, leading again another successful group. And it's amazing to see the transition that people go through on the journey, because most times they look at the mountain and they freak out because they're looking at it from about 3,000 feet up to over 19,000 feet. And just like life, if you break it down into those incremental steps, day by day by day by day, you're going to get there. And again, if you have a deeper purpose and if you're focusing on the true summit, not the false summit, you're going to make it. And we've actually turned it more of we've changed it from not an expedition, because if it's you versus Mother Nature, you're not going to make it. You're never going to win that battle. Mother Nature will win that every single time. But if it's always you versus you. So it's not an expedition, it's an inspedition. It's an inward journey through an outward adventure.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I loved it when we talked about that inspedition, and it's that inward versus the outward. And I think you talked about this immersive coaching experience that you provide for the folks as they're going through this, which is really cool. Let's talk about how do people get involved. Like if I wanted to sign up, or I had a friend that wanted to go, like where do they go to get involved?
Same place as they want to get more information, just SeanSwarner.com. And they can fill out the form that's there, or send me an email, summit or info at SeanSwarner.com. And as you mentioned, there's that little kind of a bonus nugget at the end. We spend 7 days on the mountain, and then we fly into the Serengeti for a 4-day safari.
Which is amazing. I mean, both experiences are, you're lucky if you get to do one of them in your lifetime, and to be able to do both back to back. My sister-in-law and her family are over there right now doing that very same thing. The tour, not the climbing of Kilimanjaro. There's one other thing I want to touch on before we get to some of our fun questions. So can we talk about the Cancer Survival Network and the fact that you were putting some final touches on this, and basically this platform, this amazing platform you're building? Or do we need to cut this out of our conversation here?
No, that's okay. It's before we start charging for it, it's open, it's free for everybody who goes there. It's thesummitchallenge.com, thesummitchallenge.com. And it is the most comprehensive cancer survivors program and network that I have ever seen. It helps people utilize what they've been through to get more out of life, what they've been through to become stronger. And at the end, there's a bonus section that helps people speaking, and it helps them use their voice to help others. It's more of empowering speaking than anything else, because inspiration and motivation, it'll never last. But if you can empower someone to do it on their own, you change their life forever.
Well, that's amazing. And I think you had mentioned there are 50 different videos. So it's not just you have to slog through a bunch of reading, which, that's fine. Some people like to read, but I personally like to learn from videos or audio. And so I would highly encourage people to go out and check it out. But while it's still free, this is the free trial, right? Um, and then I do want to shift into, we have there's one serious, but some fun questions. And I'm really curious as to how you're going to answer this. So what's the dirtiest sounding word that isn't actually dirty?
Two things came to mind. One is I think women hate it, but it's the word moist. Um,
Yes.
and the other is actually a Swahili word, kaka, which in
And what does the word
Swahili,
kaka mean? Do we
it
know?
it in Swahili it means brother.
Brother. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a completely different term in English and Swahili.
So if I call you kaka Swarner, then you won't take any offense to that.
No, not at all. They also call me
Okay.
Mzungu Kicha in Swahili, so I'll take whatever. Kaka Swanner, yeah, Kaka Shan.
Well, thank you for that. We have had one reference to moist before, so thank you for doing that. And I like the kaka one. We're getting multilingual here. All right, the second one, and I'm sure you have had a chance to meet a lot of famous people on your journey. We talked about Jimmy V's brother and the ESPN Awards, but who has impressed you the most in terms of everyone that you've met?
Archbishop Desmond Tutu. When he
Wow.
was alive, yeah, when he was alive, he was the cutest, shortest old man I've ever met in my life. I'm about 6'2", and he came up to, I don't know, maybe my chin. And I was receiving an award from the George Washington University, at George Washington University, for the Spirit of Life Award. And I remember being up on stage, and our tables were about 15 feet away from one another. And I got up on stage and I said, I can't accept this unless I do so on behalf of all survivors. And if there's anyone in the audience, please stand up and join me together in accepting this. And he was a cancer survivor. And he got up on stage and he's like, Sean, where are you? You made me cry. You made my daughter cry. You made my whole table cry. And then we connected afterwards. And he was just a truly genuine, good-hearted, wonderful human being.
I love hearing that story, and that was probably the last person I expected you to say, but that is it's really cool, and that's part of the goal of the show is to give people inspiration and prove that in this time of turbulence, right, both sides, like there's a lot going on, that there are very good people in the world and they are doing amazing things. So I appreciate you sharing that. I do want to find out, and I can't imagine that you have any regrets given what you've lived through, but share one of your biggest regrets.
I would say, and no, she's not here. She can't even hear me. She may not even watch this. My wife and I met in 2011. I was giving a presentation. I was up on stage, and she was sitting in the front row. This was in San Juan, and the room was filled full of about 1,000 people. And I remember looking out in the audience, and my eye caught her sitting in the front row, and my eyes kept going back to her, and it kept going back to her. And it was the first and only time I had to tell myself, dude, stop staring. Like someone's going to notice. Scan the room. So I consciously, excuse me, I consciously had to tell myself to scan the room. So we met afterwards, and I got her phone number. And she traveled, I traveled. We casually met up in New York City, Vegas, Miami, and other places. And we didn't really start dating each other seriously until years and years later. So I would say my biggest regret would be not asking her out and not making it more formal sooner.
Well, that's a great story, and I'm going to have to tag your wife in this now so she does listen to this because I think she'll appreciate that story. Last one. Name one band or artist that you wish you had seen in concert. Ideally, it's someone that is no longer touring, or you couldn't go see, like a Led Zeppelin or whatever. But share that with us.
There are a couple of them. One comes to my mind immediately was when we ran the 777, 7 marathons, 7 continents, 7 days. it wasn't just me. It was a handful of about 35 people. It's a real thing, um, and called the Great World Race. And we chartered the Rolling Stones' last plane, which was really cool. And jokingly when we got on, I looked at my buddy. I was like, "Man, it smells like Keith Richards and cocaine in here." So it didn't, and I have no idea what cocaine smells like, so I was just joking. But I would say the Rolling Stones. I wish I would have seen the Rolling Stones. That would have been cool. And the Beatles. I love just the riffs of the Beatles.
Well, I think there's still a chance for the Rolling Stones because even though they said that they are retired and they're not doing it again, they seem to keep sort of bringing it back out. And you mentioned Keith Richards. This is a guy that I don't know is formaldehyde or all the smoking, but he seems like he's preserved forever and he's going to live until 120. So, but the
But he
Beatles
has
would have been a
everything in
good get.
balance.
Yeah, I did hear a rumor, by the way, as we wrap up, that Paul McCartney, Ringo, and what is his name? Who Eric Clapton are actually going to be touring. And I've made a
Ooh,
rule with my kids, which is if there's someone you want to see, I had a chance to see Nirvana 3 times in 1990. It was either 92, I think it was 92. Didn't, and it's one of my biggest regrets. I'm like, if there's someone you want to see, we need to make it happen. So I'm going to see them. And so if you get to see the Rolling Stones, if I see that they're touring, Sean, I'm going to reach out to you and make sure you get tickets.
absolutely. Please do. Please do. We'll have to go together.
Yes, 100%. Well, with that, we will wrap up. Sean, thank you so much. This is such an inspirational way to start a Friday, and hopefully everyone listening is equally inspired. Please go to seanswarner.com and check out all the amazing content that's there and all the amazing opportunities, and consider getting involved in his charities. And thank you for sharing your time and your story.
My pleasure, Aaron. Thank you for doing what you're doing and helping so many people.
I'm doing my best.